Hello, I'm Dan Fell, Chief Exec of Doncaster Chamber, and it's my pleasure to introduce this episode of the Knowledge and Skills Cast. Delivered by the South Yorkshire Chambers of Commerce, this podcast is a continuation of much of the thinking, research and insight that went into the production of our local skills improvement plan. Like that groundbreaking document, we'll be looking at what needs to be done to help our region maximise its potential when it comes to workforce and talent, while also helping you get to grips with the big changes that are happening in relation to skills across Doncaster, Sheffield, Barnsley and Rotherham. Each episode, we will be hearing from leading experts and industrious South Yorkshire organisations who have really made a name for themselves in this space. Whether that's through their innovative HR practices, smart recruitment tactics, or progressive attitudes towards people development. Spanning a wide range of different industries, these professionals will be sharing their experiences, the challenges they've overcome, and the winning strategies that have made them such success stories. So whether you're just starting up in business and looking for fresh insights or are simply curious to go behind the scenes of some well-known local employers, there's bound to be something here in the Knowledge and Skills Cast that grabs your attention. Get ready to be inspired as we shine a spotlight on leading regional businesses and the skills revolution happening here in South Yorkshire.
Welcome to today's Knowledge and Skills Cast. Today I'm having a conversation with one of the best people in education today, Emma Beal, Principal and Chief Executive at Northern College. Welcome, Emma. Thank you so much for joining me today. I get to work with Emma quite regularly, so we know each other really well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Can you introduce your organisation, what it does, and your own role within it, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Emma Beal, as you say. I'm the Principal and Chief Exec at Northern College. Northern College is a really special organisation. It's the only adult residential college in the north of England, and we cover off all of South Yorkshire. So we support adults from across the region. We're an adult-only college, so that means everything we do is all about adult skills. So this conversation's at the heart of what we do. We offer courses from all levels, so people returning to wanting to upskill right at the beginning of their journey through to people looking to move on to kind of higher level skills, university courses, those sorts of things. So a real range of courses. I've been fortunate enough to visit this beautiful college that we've got, and we are blessed to have this in the region. It's very special. And I was talking to a gentleman, he was on a programme, I can't remember the programme actually, but he said that it was kind of transforming his life and it was preparing him to go and find a job. He felt that he was going to get those skills to get a job. And he just says how welcoming everybody was. He said it was a pretty special place, and it's something that I've always felt. I mean, you're surrounded by the most beautiful scenery, wonderful staff, and such a diverse range of things that you do. So, you are one of the key partners in the LSIP project. So today is part of, and people who've joined us before will know that, we've been doing a number of these podcasts because of the local skills improvement plan, and also a number of things in collaboration. And I just wondered whether you wanted to, before we go into the questions, whether you just wanted to talk about to those employers that might be listening in to this, that Northern, and I think you've really done a great job to change Northern and to really look at its employer-facing provision as well. And I just wondered if you wanted to touch on that, to say, well, what investment you've had through the LSIP, and then how that's going to help you to engage more with employers as well. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the investment through the LSIP, that's been great for us. We're a really small college. So even though we've got that beautiful building, and if anyone doesn't know what me and Nikki are talking about, just Google Northern College and you'll soon see we're in a grade 1 listed building.
in the beautiful parkland of the National Trust. It really is an oasis, kind of on the outskirts of Barnsley. It's such a special place. And what being part of the LSIP's done for us is it's allowed us to get some of that high-tech equipment in that digital space into that wonderful old building. Because for us, a lot of the adults that we see, they're returning to learning and they're nervous about digital skills. So being able to kind of transform the resources that we've got means that we can work on that for everybody. So it's not just about people who are coming to train in digital skills. It's making sure that no matter what you're training, whether you're training to be a security guard, whether you're training to go into logistics, we're working on that digital capability with them. So it's been really helpful for us because a lot of our adults are very nervous about digital in terms of that reskilling. So
they got so much to offer, haven't they? And we are, we're looking at that kind of upskilling existing workforces, but also bringing new people into the market. So, and it doesn't matter what sector you're talking to, whether it be manufacturing, construction, every piece of work that I've been doing through LSIP, there is a thread that goes throughout, which is digital. And that's not just, although before we came on air, we've been talking about AI a lot, but it's about even the fundamentals of Word, the kind of, Word office-based sort of stuff. And then it's the very technical AI and digital and data analytics and things like that. So what are you doing around the digital kind of curriculum then in terms of making sure that that's going to support people back into work?
As I say, a lot of what we're doing is making sure that the whole of the college offer is really digitally informed and that we're doing that piece of work to make sure that everyone who engages in any provision with us has got better digital skills as a result of that. And that those are digital skills they can use for work as well as for life. So you're right, we were talking about AI, which is kind of one of the hot topics at the minute, and we were talking about something called prompt crafting. So Google that if you haven't looked it up already. And in essence, it's teaching people how to ask those prompts of their AI. So we're working a lot with our students, regardless of what course they're on, to make sure that they're using those tools because it's going to make their learning more efficient. At the end of the day, we're all about saving time. When adults return to learning, they're time poor. It's a commitment that they make to take a pause in their life to do something different, even if that pause is just a week. So we think awfully about the time that they've given to us and how important that time is. So anything we can do to make their lives more efficient is better. So we're really focused on that. But at the same time, we're also doing those basic digital skills for employers. So things like digital promotion in business. So many small organisations that need that expertise in their business. So we've got a great 2-day course around digital promotion in business, which we're really pleased about at the moment. But also, some basic programming provision that's really successful as well. Some basic coding, kind of some of those kind of first steps. So we're focused on lots of shorter digital interventions for people that they can pick up and work within their business rather than at the moment for us, rather than the longer more traditional qualifications. I guess what's changed at Northern in terms of employer provision is that we are trying to do more of those short, sharp interventions for people alongside our more traditional subject areas that we've always been known for in terms of training people for healthcare, training people for education and teaching. We're also doing more of those shorter, snappier interventions that hopefully help them at work.
Yeah. So I did, as part of the LSIP this morning, I did we've CADA Research has done a number of papers and they will be looking across a number of sectors, but the manufacturing and construction one is done now. So I said I would lead on the manufacturing group. So this morning, I pulled together people from people who delivered manufacturing, thinking, right, I had everybody in the room. And it became clear as we were talking that actually a lot of the stuff that we're talking about doesn't have to be about this. I mean, the technical skills is one thing, but it's those broader skills, particularly around sort of communication and, work ready and all those sorts of things. But it also was about digital HR. And particularly the small businesses were saying, they really could do with short, sharp
training around digital and around sort of middle management stuff, HR. So I'm thinking the next meeting, I need to get somebody from Northern College there, as well as other training providers that, and when the group's so big that you can't do anything with it. But, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, we need other people there.
We need those middle managers. And I often think about what those middle managers need is obviously that core training around management, but also that stepping up. So a lot of our middle managers have stepped up, and that's brilliant in terms of their journey. But actually, they then need to learn the behaviours and moving from being part of the team to someone who's leading the team. And I think that's something that you coach people through.
Yeah.
So, again, it's something that you can do so much of this online, and that's brilliant. But these sorts of pieces of work, you need those people to come together with other people who are in a similar situation and to work those things through. So I think those workshops where people around, management can come together and kind of explore those ideas are really helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, skills, and there's a question here around skills and knowledge and the difference, and I kind of see them hand in hand. So I don't know what you think, but for me, being in manufacturing, yes, you've got to have the knowledge, but if you can't put it into practice, and then that's not really very good. So I don't know what you think about whether, but it's as plain as that for me. It's the skills are the demonstration of the knowledge and that you've gained, but in a very practical way. But what do you think?
The two things are together, aren't they? I think the days of academic versus vocational are hopefully long gone, although policy still seems to want to drive two separate directions. But for us that are in the mix of it, you're doing both at the same time. If you think about something like, I don't know, counselling, counselling, training counsellors is really popular at the moment. There's a lot of demand for it across the sector, and a lot of people are really interested in that. They need to understand the theoretical basis of what they're doing. Yeah. But if they can't empathise with people and they haven't got good communication skills, then all the theoretical knowledge in the world isn't going to move that forward. So I think it's always about bringing the two things together. And we focus a lot on, we have a set of transferable skills that we embed in all of our teaching at Northern. We call them the Northern College skills, and not dissimilar to, you see them in schools in all phases of education, but we have a set of 6 that we work on. I'm not going to name them even because I'll test myself in a minute. In essence, it's about developing adaptability, it's developing resilience and problem solving. And those are the things that, are core to everything we do. And then you put the technical skills, the subject specific skills alongside those. And if you get those two things right, you throw your digital skills alongside as well. Hopefully you've got someone who can not only achieve that particular piece of learning they're doing, but they go out and they know what to do when they come across the next piece of learning they've got to do. Because fundamentally, we've moved into a world whereby there's no job for life anymore. Everything's moving and changing, and people need to be confident to come back and pick that up.
Just to sort of pick up on that. I mean, again, I talk about there were another couple of things that came up. So those soft transferable skills, really important. So, you can see apprenticeships, knowledge, skills and behaviours, because the behaviours were the things that were really missing from the old apprenticeship frameworks. Again, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. Most of my employers that I talk to say, well, of course we want the good technical skills that we deliver for them. Of course, they want these people that can go onto the machines and be productive. That goes without saying. But being work ready, fitting within the organisation, being problem solvers, because, all those sorts of, they're not soft skills. They're absolutely mandatory skills that every individual should have. So they're really important, aren't they?
Definitely. I sometimes think they're more important than anything else. And employers will say all the time that we can teach the technical skills, because at the end of the day, those move and change, and you've got to be so specific to your business and what's important to your business. So if you've got someone who has got those underpinning skills, you've potentially got an employee that's going to work well for you for as long as, as that's going.
Yeah.
Rather than someone who's got a short-term kind of skill that they can give you.
We're providers. this isn't on the list, but I'm just thinking it's a really good time to ask this question. What could some of my employers have said, or a lot of employers have said that they engage with schools, they do a lot of engagement with schools. What more could employers do then to embed some of these kind of life skills into their curriculum? Or, they do a great job and they got a curriculum to follow and they're all kind of exhausted. But what do we think our schools could be doing in this place?
So I think for us, what we talk about in those spaces is, well, if we had those parents and grandparents who were engaged in that learning, who understood what it was that their children needed to be able to do and could support them with that, they'd have a much better chance. So I think for me, it's about communicating that message out to parents and giving them the opportunity to engage as well, because they're your key influencers on what decisions those children are going to make. And then it goes back to the digital skills. If you want a workforce of children who are coming out of school with good digital skills, we need to do something with the parents and grandparents who are at home unable to log into the school platform to be able to support them in the first place. So, I think it's that connection that maybe we haven't thought about before. If we thought about how we could engage more with parents, then, that would absolutely reap benefits for us.
What do you think we could do? Because we've seen this, haven't we, where, you've had those outreach centres, you had all these different things and pots of money that come and go depending on what the priorities are of the country and the regions at the moment. What could we do then as providers to better support that?
Oh, Nikki, I mean, some of it I think is basics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Around supporting in terms of our resources. So thinking about the resources that we've got in education that we could extend to our families potentially.
Yeah.
So that they've got access to those things and they can explore those, in a fun way. I suppose I question myself then because, not people don't always want to go to school again, do they? So it's about doing it in a different setting, asking businesses to open their doors maybe and kind of put on, those opportunities, because parents are probably not going to come and engage as easily, or some parents in a school environment, but they might come, and I always think about the times that I was shown behind the scenes in logistics organisations. God, I was fascinated. The more of those sorts of things that businesses could support parents with to unlock for them what it really would be like to work in their sector. And I'm sure it must be the same. Manufacturing would be a great case. People's perception of what that is versus what it really looks like for people. So maybe it's how we use our immersive classrooms to actually do some of that unlocking for parents.
I think that this is why I feel so I feel so lucky that we're part of. I mean, South Yorkshire, I think, has got the best businesses. I say this on every podcast and I just mean it. And I think that we've got brilliant schools, we've got brilliant providers. So, I think it's very strong. It's now how we continue to strengthen that. So, changing the subject slightly, but on the same vein. So employers have been saying on this manufacturing research that we've done that, they have a good awareness of apprenticeships. They have a reasonably good understanding of Skills Bank. They want to know more about the Institute of Technology. But they also want to know more about what providers can offer. And we're going to put an action plan together and I think we're doing that at the end of every paper to say, well, how do we get that information? It is about ensuring that the majority of employers get that information in a way that's useful to them, rather than a bit of an overload and a hard sell. Because I think they're just looking to understand where they can get things from. And what that's going to be. So we're going to really task ourselves to take that as a priority. So first of all, give the widest population of employers the understanding of what's available. And then how do we make that adaptable, and how do we have that golden thread and hide the wiring and do that as a collaboration? No one provider can do everything. That's what I believe. I'd like to think that we are a really good provider in manufacturing. We still can't do everything. Can't do everything to all people.
What we do as an organisation well is we respond to the smaller organisations, because we're a smaller organisation. So, I'm not going to be able to, service 1,000 people for a big employer next week, but I can absolutely sort 10 for you.
Yeah.
So, and I think that might not be worth the while for one of the other bigger colleges. So it's about understanding that, isn't it? Employers understanding adult skills. I think, we have to do a better job, and our funders know this too, around just, demystifying it all. Because at the moment, the only thing you can honestly say to an employer is, I'll come and talk to you. Because actually, the funding mechanisms are so complicated in terms of, there's kind of a list of questions you've got to get through before you can work out what the cost would be for someone.
Yeah.
And likewise in terms of what would be a best fit, because it is, it is complicated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for now, I think we always say to an employer, well, let's have a chat and we'll go from there. And I often say to people, the reality is in South Yorkshire, for the sorts of people that we tend to work with, so a lot of the adults that we train are unemployed at the point that they take that on. So I think something like 70% of my adult students last year were unemployed at the point that they arrived with me at Northern. And by the time they'd finished, half of those were in work and the other half were continuing to learn.
Fantastic.
It's great. And therefore, you kind of end up saying to people, come and talk to me, because you can probably get it for free. I know as a business owner that I want to know, what's it costing me and what's my time commitment? And when someone says to me, let me talk to you about it first, I think,
we were talking the other day at the LSIP board and saying, we really have to, one of the things we could do is have a bit of a workshop style where when employers come, we're able to present what we do, but it's more about what is it you want and how can that happen? So, get Simca in the room with the boot camps and the, how to fill in your application form for your bid for Skills Bank and things like that. So I think that we've got to provide good opportunities for people to walk away with something. I've come asking for something and I've got an answer and I walk away with it, and I can't do everything, but I'm hoping that does work.
And sharing with employers what other employers in a similar position to them are doing. You hear so-and-so's doing, and I think sometimes there's something that we don't do enough of, because the one thing about South Yorkshire is we're not good at shouting about how great we are. We know that. And I think, if we did more of that, more showcasing of the successful, kind of training and skills development we've done, I think then I would like to think more employers would have a look at that and think, that works for me. I can see a similarity to how my business functions in that space.
I say that I've said this on every podcast as well. We've got so many things to be proud of. In South Yorkshire, we really do not celebrate our successes. We just don't shout. It's almost like we're slightly embarrassed by saying that we were good at things. So we do need to get better at that. And one of the things that employers did say is that they would be very happy to meet with other employers to share those experiences and around HR and all sorts, that to learn from each other. And we were talking this morning about building that learning community. We've got to get better, I think, at working with employers. We've got to, when we say we're going to work with employers, we need to really work with them. And what do they bring to the table? And that's a commitment on their part, and time is really precious to them. But if we're going to make a dent in the skills gaps and the skills deficits that we've got, and we're not going to lose the skills because there's some skills that employers are worried about losing and not being able to replace those, we've got to build our learning community that this isn't just about providers, but is about employers as well.
Yeah, and it's got to be about not just employers, but potentially kind of thinking about that wider remit of people, that we're trying to bring back into the labour market. There's a huge amount of work going on in South Yorkshire at the moment through the Pathways to Work Commission around people that we class as kind of economically inactive. But those people are a missed opportunity because those people have got lots of life experience that they can bring into the mix. I was thinking about a student of mine this morning who's training to be a paramedic at the moment. And she'd been out of work for 10 years with a misdiagnosis, for an autism diagnosis and a dyslexia diagnosis, and out of work for 10 years as a result of that. And she's now training to be a paramedic. And you just think, and these people they're not unusual. These are, they're amazing, but they're not, they're not just one-offs.
No.
There are people like this in our community in South Yorkshire all over. And we've got to get together with colleagues in our health services to understand what it is that's preventing people, because people want to be in work. I'm so sure of that. I think this rhetoric is dangerous. People want to be in work. They want to be meaningfully engaged in what's going on, but we need to support the whole person.
Because there's a fear on all sides, isn't it? If you've been out to work for 10 years, there is a real fear about that. That's a massive change for somebody. And to be misdiagnosed for so long and to be struggling and thinking, what's going on here? And then, you really do need to help those people. But then an employer will want to do the best job for an individual as well. They'll want to make sure that they provide the right environment for those. So I think I see providers as the kind of conduit between that individual and the employer and putting the right support in place.
Yeah, and for us as a residential college, if you think about an example like that, the great thing for us was that was a journey that took that person a while until they were ready to go there.
Yeah.
But we were able to work through those barriers and set those routines up through that residential experience. So that student stayed with us, 2 nights a week for 6 months studying the Access to HE course. But over the course of that, we worked on all the routines for learning, the routines for work, getting up at the right time, being where you need to be, deadlines, all of that work. That means that when she then moves into that role, we've got to be able to invest in those people, haven't we? And you're right, employers, have every right to kind of ask themselves those questions about who they can and can't support in work. But I think if we kind of can get that package together for them, it should be good.
The majority of employers all the employees I talk to, they've not once have I ever heard anybody say, well, I wouldn't want to look at somebody with a disability or never have I had that conversation. But they do want to provide the right place for them and the right support for neurodivergent, whatever it is. They do want to be able to provide the right support. And there will be fear, particularly if they're a very small organisation. Have I got the right support in place? Well, providers can be that support, can't they?
Yeah, and we can do those bits of training for them as well. We can do those kind of more CPD. We can just, we can offer that into the mix as providers, because that's our, offering to go into providers and doing sessions on those sorts of topics for them. We probably need to get better at that too.
Which, yeah. Oh, we'll have a list of things to do by the end of this. Just some more general. So, general question? So, what challenges do educators face today in terms of not just teaching practical skills, but just kind of what are we up against at the moment?
Oh, I mean, the honesty is we're up against the pace of technology change.
Yes.
And people's confidence levels to move with that technology change. Absolutely. Hence the real need to do that work. We're up against health, we're up against still, the kind of coming out of the impact of the pandemic, which even though it's a number of years, we're seeing that. And as I was driving across here today, I was listening to, the talk about the fact that the not unemployment education or training rates for 19 to 24-year-olds are 11. I think it was an 11-year high. And I thought, God, that's pretty depressing. And we know that that's a cohort of young people who haven't been meaningfully engaged since they finished school. So there's a job of work, I think, for us to do to understand how we put those kind of multidimensional, kind of packages together to support those young people. It's not easy, but we've got to work that out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that, digital tech and the broader impact of health, I think, are the two big things that we see.
Yeah. I mean, I want to always make sure that we're at the forefront of manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing says it all, really, doesn't it? But the amount of investment in people upskilling our existing staff and then the technology that goes with it is significant. And I think that we've got to get serious about, making sure that if we want our employers to have the best, then we need investment. We need that continuous investment in our staff and in our technology to be able to even just keep up with technology.
It's kind of a bit of an elephant in the room, but adult skills is the poor relation in from a government funding perspective. We know that to be true. Year by year, there's not enough money to go around.
Yeah.
And definitely, adults fares poorly in the mix of that. And that is really challenging because there's a risk, therefore, that innovation, there isn't that money to fund that innovation. And that's really important. So there's absolutely a need for things like the LSIP partnership where we're working together, because that's how you get those economies of scale and that shared practice. When money's tight, that's the only way you can kind of work that through, because the reality is it's not going to improve in terms of money coming into education in the foreseeable future. So we've got to be cannier with the resources.
We've got to, as I said, it's always hiding the wiring, because employers don't need to know all the baggage behind who's doing what when, but we need to make sure that an individual's journey, whether that be an employer or an individual, gets what they need from wherever they need it to be successful. And I guess it isn't just about jobs, but ultimately most of the stuff we do is about getting somebody into employment, into a better job, or just into higher education or further education. So we need that golden thread so that an individual can start on their journey here, finish in a different organisation maybe, but is successful and gains what they need along the way.
Yeah, and we talked a lot around this idea of how do you allow adults to build a kind of portfolio that moves with them in that space, so that as an employer, and I know this is easy for me to say, but as an employer, when you lose that person, that hopefully you're going to gain someone from somewhere else that someone else is invested in. And there's a kind of circle that runs through the region. And I know that's easier said than done, particularly, dependent on the size of the organisation and the investment that you've got available to you. But that work that we could do as providers of badging those skills that we give to people, so that the next employer can feel confident that they don't have to do that piece of learning again, or that they can they can take that through, I think would help. I would hope would help.
Yeah, it's almost like a made in South Yorkshire brand, isn't it? And clarity around the skills that they and their knowledge they've developed along the way. We talk a lot about qualifications, and we've got to get smarter on that, I think, in terms of, if I'm an employer, I might not know what the T level is, but underneath that, I want to know as an employer what those skills, what the skills that have been gained, and at what sort of competency that they've gained. Are they able to work on their own? Do they still need supervision? Is it equivalent to something that I know very well, which might be A levels or O level? Yeah, GCSEs, O levels. Oh my God, showing my age now. But it's about that simplicity. It's words that I've used that have been used earlier today. That being agile, flexible, simplicity, clarity for employers. They're all the things that I think we're striving to do, and we recognise that that's really needed, but it's like turning a tank sometimes, It is. I've sat on, I don't know how many boards now, and how many times I've had people come to visit the training centre where I've said the same thing, but I'm hoping somewhere somebody's listening and saying, okay, then, there's enough people saying it now that we really need to simplify.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think there is that understanding. And I think the sentiment behind regional devolution is about trying to get that more local power. You've just got to get through the kind of the changing process.
Yeah, and I feel the pain of our colleagues in these departments, because, as taxpayers' money, so rightly so, there has to be that bureaucracy around it. There has to be that testing. It's got to be thorough and of high quality. But it's not that it helps, but I guess that as educators, we can be as frustrated with a kind of clunky system as everybody else is. But we're, anybody out there listening, we are really trying our very hardest to influence that change. And part of that is about that strength in collaboration. So, we know it, we've heard, we've listened, and now we're trying to build those kind of simplifying blocks to make it easier for employers and individuals to get what they need. How do skills in education vary across different cultural and national education systems?
Nationally, I'm not, obviously, you get different flavours in different countries.
Yes.
And over the years, I've been fortunate enough to go to a number of different places and kind of see how it comes. But I think it is more a cultural difference in terms of what we do and don't prioritise and put prestige against.
Yeah.
I think, would be what I would see in terms of how it works. So, and again, I'm not sure that's always needs to be a big challenge. I was with some students. They were studying mental health first aid, and there was a student in there who'd come from the Ukraine. And she was explaining to me how refreshing it was to be having these conversations about mental health, because in her country, these were not conversations that you had. She, and I can only speak as to how she told it to me. I'm making a comment.
Yeah.
But, she was saying, I come from a culture where it's just get on with it. And in your country, in this country that we're in, there was a much more, a larger desire to understand what was going on. So I think, you see some of those kind of cultural differences within that. And in terms of people's attitude to authority is quite interesting. I get told probably once every couple of weeks that I can't possibly be the principal. You can't see me, but I don't look like some of my students think that I should look. So I think there are still some really interesting kind of stereotypes that function, kind of around skills. But it changes a lot.
Yeah, it does. Just before we move on from mental health, because it's a massive thing. So, as I said earlier, well-being and mental health came up quite a lot, and employers understand, and they really understand that well-being is so important in an organisation. So, what do you do with your staff? Because you've got quite a number of staff, haven't you? What are you doing as a business, really?
So we've got we're signed up to a mental health charter. So there's a sector specific mental health charter, and within that, we kind of put a plan together, and that plan, we've got kind of a team of staff that are involved in that, and I think that's really helpful in terms of having staff at all kind of levels of an organisation talking about what isn't and isn't important within wellbeing. And for us, a lot of that's about culture. It's about the culture that we set and the way that we speak with one another and the way that we interact with one another. And I think that's one of the things we're really proud of in our organisation is we're a people-first organisation. But in terms of other things that we do, obviously, we're really fortunate to be set in such a beautiful natural environment.
Yeah.
So we encourage use of the outdoors as much as possible with our students and our staff. So we've got we have a number of kind of CPD days a year, and as part of that, we'll always do an outdoor activity. So we'll do a wellbeing walk next week on CPD day. We did sports day last time, I think. So we'll try and incorporate the outdoors into what we do as part of that wellbeing. We've got an employee assistance program. I'm sure lots of businesses have, kind of one of those paid services that have got, those kind of resources and access to telephone counselling on them. And I think they're really helpful tools for employers to consider. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, could we do something more regionally around access for smaller businesses to those employee assistance programs? And I think there's something important to think about there. To be valued by our staff. We try and be flexible about working patterns. So we're a campus-based organisation, therefore people need to be on campus. But we our services that aren't face-to-face, work a blended week. And we, teachers prep from home. So, some of those things have become regular practice, and people value those. They value what that gives to them managing the rest of their life, their other caring responsibilities. I think caring responsibilities is a critical one, isn't it? Whether that's children, kind of parents or elderly relatives, pets. Everyone got dogs in the pandemic, me included, and now someone's got to work out who's home for the dog. So I think flexibility, and it works both ways, doesn't it? Yeah, and I think that's what you've got to expect. We've got a culture, I'd like to think, where everyone works really hard. So it's a quid pro quo from that perspective. But
I mean, it's something that I think about all the time. I'm not sure I always get right, and I think that the day I think I've got it all right, I probably need to hang my hat up because I've not been realistic anymore. I've lost a sense of who I am and the world we live in. And I think about the last year for us, and we were waiting for Ofsted to come, and we were, and you're kind of tight on your budgets and all sorts of things that are happening in the university sector at the moment. But further education and adult education has lived with these problems a lot in terms of where's the funding coming from, funding cuts, things costing a lot more, but funding not going up. And do you think that they're the same challenge? Are they the same challenges that you have at the moment as an organisation?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when it comes to a funding and, and the thorny issue of pay, you can't get around that by giving someone access to an employee assistance program. Yeah. So you've got to be honest about what you can and can't do. And I think that's where, we have those honest conversations. And you're right, thinking about like a peak in your business, and, you can sustain that for so long. And I think staff are willing to come with you when they know that there's a deadline looming, but it can't always be like that. There has to then be, kind of a period of time where, where you're not always charging at something. And that's hard, isn't it? When it feels like kind of one after the celebrating success, and back to that, And again, I think people, we're really great. And I'm sure it's just a human nature. We're really great, and particularly as leaders and managers, of zoning in on the things that aren't working, seeing the things that have gone well and moving on in 10 seconds. And from a staffing perspective, that's where we go wrong. I think if we're not careful, we don't give enough time to congratulate and take a moment to celebrate. And we just kind of move on to the thing that isn't working. So yeah, if I was thinking about something I need to do more of, it is celebrate the small wins. And make sure everyone knows, about the small successes. And then I suppose I would say, which is maybe easier in a people organisation, but, we do what we do for a reason. And therefore, the more we can be in contact with the result of our actions, the students that we work with, the more enjoyable.
That's why we do the job, isn't it? To see those successes. I love working with employers and apprentices. So they're just the most amazing people. I measure all my success on that. It's not about it's not about me. It's about how successful the training centre is, because that's where I get my pleasure from. But you're absolutely right. And I know as an individual, I need to more consistently look at those small successes and really celebrate them. I recognise them and I give recognition for it. But I'm quickly, I think, as I'm being very honest now, I quickly move on into so what do we need to improve on? And it's there's a competitiveness and a drive as an individual. But, ultimately, is coming from the right place. I want to do our very best, and I want my staff, I want my colleagues to feel really great about the job they do. But it's the how we do it. It's about the stopping and kind of recognising those successes, but also realising that there's a burnout. There's a level of burnout that can happen. I don't know if education is gonna ever change. I think that when you've got your students look after and employers, and the way that we're funded and all those sorts of things, I think that it is really hard to get that sort of culture all of the time, because we're always waiting for the next Ofsted, or we're always waiting for the next audit, or but I guess that we have to be strong in that. And I think that being able to share that openly, providing a place where staff can talk openly about that and not feel that they're going to be judged or, I think that's the important thing, but to do that consistently. Yeah, I was long-winded, but that's how I feel about it, and I'm not very good at that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think there's a real dynamic in education, isn't there? Around, there are some real benefits to being in the sector that you wouldn't get in other sectors, and reminding ourselves of some of those things, some of the protections that gives, that gives our staff as well. You've got to focus on the things that are working well, and we smile and laugh and say, you might do something else if you weren't so passionate about the outcome, but
Oh, my staff are great. They love what they do, and I see them every day going above and beyond. And they'll do anything for those students to make sure that they succeed. And it is heartwarming. I don't think I'd ever want to, I've just had a bit of it's burning out of a labor. I wouldn't want to be doing anything different. I love my job. I love working for the University of Sheffield. And it's an exciting sector. Manufacturing is an exciting sector to be in. But actually working with the colleagues I work with every day and seeing those students achieve is I wouldn't change it for the world. And none of us would. No educators would. We all say that. We all go, it's really difficult, but we wouldn't do another job. So that's impressive, I think, and that's just amazing. We've touched on funding, but how does funding and resource allocation impact on your ability to provide that quality education all the time?
The challenge that we've got to wrestle on the ground is that when funding reduces, it squeezes out space for something. It has to do, doesn't it? And I think the risk that we discuss is that it squeezes out space for development and time to think. And as educators, that should be what we're about, time to think and develop. But I think there's a risk that it squeezes some of that space out. And in such a regulated environment, which is right and proper in some ways. Yeah. In such a regulated environment, there's a risk, therefore, that all developments focus towards Ofsted, for example, rather than the craft of teaching. So I think that's the biggest challenge for us to manage. When I talk to staff about their own professional development, it's not that they don't want to do that work. It isn't that they don't want to come out and spend the day in industry. It's the conversation that goes a bit like, that's fine, Emma, but you always want me to mark this work in this time and do X, which of these things are we gonna prioritize? And I think the risk then is that the day out in industry drop and that's a short-termist approach. In the long term, the student misses out. The member of staff hasn't had the time to develop. So that would be the thing that strikes me the most at the moment is, how do we keep our delivery staff up to date? Because actually, they need to be specialists in the craft teaching, particularly, I think, in the adult space where adults are, they're bringing a lot of baggage potentially of not learning for a long time. So you've really got to, you've got to be able to work with them in a particular way. And you learn that over years. But in those years, you're not still doing the thing you'd done before. So that's the big challenge. Alongside that challenge also of kind of how do you find space from an employer perspective to give those meaningful experiences to educators when, you've got schools wanting you to do it, you've got 16 to 19-year-olds, apprentices, everything. And then you've got CPD for teaching staff being asked of you as well. So I think there's a piece of work for us to do around that I'd be really keen to see. And again, I think that's where, as a collaboration, and, I said it about businesses and now I'm going to have to say it about my own sector, we need our teachers to be able to learn from each other. And we need to acknowledge that might mean that, they might look at another college down the road and think, oh, that looks quite nice, I'm going to go there, and I might lose my teacher. And, and actually we're all really nervous about that sort of thing, particularly in certain sector areas where it's so hard. And because you're competing, with, you're just not competing on salary at all. So, I think there's something about keeping that momentum, keeping that freshness, knowing your practice. I used to work with a great catering lecturer who was so good at this. He gave so much of his time to maintaining his connections into industry. And, he still kept all of that alive. And it was truly his passion. And I used to think, how is it so much easier for him than it is potentially, for some other areas? But maybe that's about the openness of that particular sector and the way it works. But yeah, I think I won't name him, but if we could all be a bit like him.
You may lose some people along the way, but the what is the benefit? What's the ultimate benefit of it? And if that outweighs that kind of risk of maybe losing people, but actually that openness and that change brings more people into the sector, then I think we've got to accept that. As long as we're bringing people in, there's a supply, the supply and demand matches, then, okay, we'll have to take that risk. But it's what do we achieve by doing it? I certainly know that I'm very aware of competitiveness and, that fear, but I'm determined to, squash that down for the benefit of our students and our employers, because that's what we need to do. It's not easy, but I think in South Yorkshire, we're really up for the challenge, and I think we really are up for doing that. And I think we've come a long way in the last couple of years, I think, in how we work together.
In South Yorkshire, the colleges are really good at that. They've got a number of really good networks that work really well and that work on themes as well. And, those networks always work better when you've got a kind of goal, a reason to get together. But once you've done that, what you've built is, kind of relationships between people that I think are really helpful. I was really fortunate to go to something at Hull College recently, and Hull are always really generous with kind of sharing their priorities. And I gave the Hull. I haven't got a day to go to Hull. What am I doing? I've got a million things to do on campus, and I learned so much that I could practically bring back into my organisation. It was time well spent.
I mean, I guess that's what I was trying to do this morning. Really, is we have this great collaboration, lots of great boards, but I wanted to take it off to the more practical element, to say, well, actually, what is it we're going to do now? And have some key objectives to work from. So that's what we intend to do. By the end of March, we'll have a kind of practical operational plan in place that says we're going to do these 4 things. We're going to do them really well. And we'll be able to sort of say to employers, well, did you get what we said we were going to do? And I think more of that we need to do. Okay, I'm going to move on to EDI now. So what role does diversity, equity and inclusion play in the challenges your organisation faces?
The great thing about Northern is this is its lifeblood. So that is what we do. So, we have one of the highest proportions of students with a self-declaration of learning difficulty or disability or health condition in the country coming to Northern. So everything we do is crafted around people's different needs. So for us, that's about making sure that we've got really clear identification, from the get-go with people, and we understand what people's barriers are. But also a really strong culture that says, we don't mind where you've been before you came to us. This is where you're starting. So students will often talk about Northern as a second chance or even a third chance organisation, but they'll talk about the fact that we don't judge, and we genuinely don't judge. We're not concerned about where you've been before. It's about where you want to be next. And I think, that's the work that's got to be done. With people and really making sure that you kind of walk that in your day-to-day interaction with people. I met a student in a class the other day, autism. I think she was doing something about autism awareness, and it was her first time in college, and she told me she'd been a care leaver and that she'd had a really tricky journey after that, and it had not been an easy 10 years. She'd done a lot of work on herself, and here she was, and And she was saying to me, I'm not sure whether I can behave in the way that you're going to expect me to behave. And we were mainly talking around, kind of things like language use and, timekeeping and those sorts of things. And I just said, well, you know what? If you can't, the door will be open for you to try again. And it was kind of that conversation that says, for us, come and try. And if it's not right now, then we'll tell you it's not right. We'll be open and honest about that because we've got a standard of behaviour that we need to all work to. But that doesn't mean that the door won't be open for you to come and try again. So I think that's how we
kind of attitude towards it. It's making people feel comfortable, regardless of where they're from or what they're about.
Using our students to tell us how to craft the environment. So the piece of work that we recently did in terms of the new digital hub at Northern, part of that was about creating a space that was more conducive to adults with neurodiversities. So, creating those digital pods within that means that actually, if you want to work in a quieter environment, you don't want to be sat next to somebody else and, kind of in the hustle and bustle of college life, you've got that space to work. So that was really big for us. And we worked hard on the acoustics in that space as well. And we created the wellbeing zone at the far end. And we do work in there in the evenings. So, again, I think it's about how you construct an environment to support, a variety of different people, as well as how you set the tone for, what you are and how you operate.
Oh, that's great. Tell me a little bit about that award then.
So the Educator North Awards, they've got a range of different awards that go across the FE and HE sector. But for us, it was about social mobility because that's what we're all about. So for us, it's all about taking people who have got low level skills, taking people who have been, who've got, kind of barriers, whatever those barriers are, and seeing them kind of flourish and move on. So yeah, we're really excited.
I'm staying on the same theme here in terms of supporting students. So what challenges do you face when addressing mental health and well-being among students?
The probably the biggest thing in consideration is how much flex you can give, and I guess that works for staff as well as students. So it's about understanding how far you can work, and we will always keep going, particularly in terms of getting a student through their qualification and managing the circumstances. But at the end of the day, if someone's not well enough to be able to study, they're not well enough to be able to study, and you've got to be realistic about that. So for us, the way we work through that is about the flexibility of provision. So unlike a lot of college provision, we are ultimately flexible. So September isn't the only point. You can arrive at Northern any given day of the week. So we work on more of a roll-on, roll-off basis. So there's provision starting all year round. And therefore, that means that if somebody's mental health means that they need a longer, thinner program, because they know that they can't maybe commit to something in the same level of intensity, or they need to take a break and come back to something, then we've got that flexibility. So that's amazing. That flexibility, because I think that's what's hard for people, is people's circumstances change. And it's not a linear journey, that kind of well-being journey. So yeah, that's what I would say is kind of the challenge.
I'm just wondering, sort of, how do you take an individual, and when you talked about those statistics, about half of those students that in that group that you were describing got into jobs, and then the other half moved on to further and higher education. How do you move somebody on a shortish program from where they're really kind of struggling with things to being work ready?
And it's that personalised plan, isn't it? It's about understanding where that person is at that point and where they want to be, recognising that they probably don't know where they want to be if they're coming, right at that first steps. Often people aren't sure, kind of where they want to be. And that comes over the course of that interaction, that student we're talking about who, who's now training to be a paramedic. At the point she first came to us, that might have been an aspiration in her mind, but it definitely wasn't where she thought she was going to get to by the end of that week. Yeah, I think it's about incremental change for people and being realistic about, what the opportunities are.
Yeah. If I was an employer and I wanted to really explore this further with you, what would I do? What could I do?
If, for example, you had, I don't know, say some teaching assistants jobs, you were a school, or you were a retail organisation that wanted to fill some vacancies. What else we doing? We're doing some security training for some venues. So in those cases, if you're an employer who you've got some vacancies you want to fill, then we'll work on that in terms of saying, right, well, we'll do a group intervention and we'll get you some people ready and you can pick, kind of the best candidates at the end. So we do that kind of very outcomes for, if it's that upskilling, so say it's some digital skills that you want to do as another example, then we'll do that kind of piece of work that says, right, well, who is it you've got already in your workforce? What, we'll do that kind of understanding on what model are you looking at. So whilst we are a residential college, most of our employer-faced work is not residential. It's, as you would imagine, it's out on people's premises, or it's day into college delivery. It's online. We do a lot of online. So maybe that's one of the other things that's changed about Northern, that we love our campus and we're so proud of it. Actually, it's only part of what we do.
Of course, yeah.
We're out, delivering online. We're out in the community. Doing different things for employers. So yeah, I guess as ever, it depends. It depends what you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you. Change is hard for everybody, though, isn't it? I mean, it's this employer research. It talked about some change being really difficult, and that the reluctance to change. We've been doing it this way for so long, and it's worked, and therefore we don't change. And I think as educators, we've got to be an influencer there in terms of making people aware that we do need to change some of those things, whilst protecting those great things that we wouldn't want to lose. You do have to be able to adapt to change, to a changing environment.
It's everywhere. It's all around them. Yeah. And if the more comfortable they can get with that, the better chance they have of succeeding in, whatever skill it is they're trying to learn, whatever role it is they're ambitious for.
Yeah, I guess that's that kind of lifelong learning piece, really, isn't it? And our role in this is to give the individuals, whether it be students and employers, the resilience, the adaptability, so that they are the most productive that they can be in industry. And employers are looking for that, aren't they? They're looking for people that aren't afraid of change, that may bring in new ideas into their organisations, even if they aren't technically minded. They still want that new the next generation to be more savvy with technology and with adaptability and resilience.
It does.
So my final question here is, how do you plan to address the growing skills gap and equip students for the demands of the future job market? And it's kind of, we've touched on that, but is there anything else you'd like to share with us there?
It's got to go back to technology and digital skills, and how we as an education sector adapt to that as well. So the one thing that we haven't talked about is how we change the way that we deliver in order to respond to that as educators. And there's a huge amount of online content,
yes,
that's available now, and I know that from an employer perspective, that's really tempting, because it's quick to deliver, to get people through that potentially. But we've got to balance that really carefully with an understanding of the people-centered skills that people need to get, the networks that they need to build in order to be successful, and then the reality of people's digital capability. And so for me, it's about trying to get to that sweet spot of delivery mode,
yes,
that's the most cost efficient, and that's the highest quality resources. Because increasingly, we talk a lot about the demographics of the workforce, and actually what your 20-year-old's going to expect coming into the workforce versus what your 50-year-old is currently expecting, not the same.
They're not.
And if we talk a lot about the younger people coming into the workforce. You've got to adapt to that. And I think a lot of that is about skills development as well. So that's the thing that I think we're really interested in is understanding how in a modern work environment we get that right balance of kind of face-to-face and online. We moved 10 years in 6 months as an education sector when we had no choice but to. But we've now got to be really careful to kind of take the best of that forward, but not forget that we're training people and people are more than just online resources, I guess.
COVID, if nothing else, if all the horrible things that happened, it did make us we had no choice but to do sort of hybrid learning and online learning. It did. And I hope that, like you, we're looking at the balance of this. I very rarely talk to employees and students that say, I want to do it all online. Most people, I think particularly around leadership and things like that, want that group dynamic. They see the benefit of that. So I think it is that sweet spot is perfect. I want to thank you for joining us on this episode, and I really want to thank Emma for joining us today. It's been absolutely wonderful, as it always is talking to you. And if you've ever got a chance, just go and see Northern College because it is beautiful, and it's full of wonderful people as well. So our fantastic guests have shared valuable knowledge, experiences and insights, and we've had some fantastic discussions on what skills in education means and some of the key challenges our educational organisations are facing. I've been Nikki Jones. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next time for more enlightening discussions on the Knowledge and Skills Cast. Until then, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge and Skills Cast. We hope that, like us, you found this to be a fascinating discussion filled with useful insights and intriguing ideas about where our region is heading next when it comes to skills. As we wrap up each episode, I'd like to encourage you to also get involved with the conversation and to join us in celebrating those businesses that are innovating in our region. Whether it's by networking, engaging with their services, or simply spreading the word about the remarkable work they do, your support fuels the positive change happening in South Yorkshire. Please subscribe and share from whichever platform you're listening from today, and get involved with your local Chamber of Commerce as we strive to support skills development here in South Yorkshire.